Hello and welcome back to Modern Jubilees. In today's episode, let's talk about the Hebrew language just a bit more than we have. We talked about the Hebrew language as it relates to the book of Jubilees, but there is a conversation going on social media right now about a quote from Charles Krauthammer that says, "Israel is the only nation on earth that inhabits the same land, speaks the same language, and worships the same God that it did 3,000 years ago." And I, as well as others, have been questioning and wondering, what about India? What about China? What about Greece? What about all these different civilizations, nations, peoples, countries? And after further research, the quote does hold up, because most of the languages themselves are never going to reach this criteria, that a nation that speaks the same language as it did 3,000 years ago. So while even people like the Chinese, they have a written system that follows the same rules that it did 3,000 years ago, but the spoken language would not be mutually intelligible, and this is accepted and understood. However, in Hebrew, we have texts that date back 3,000 years that include the book of Samuel, Psalms, Judges, Kings, Ruth. These are books from around that time period, and they include dialogues and quotes. And these quotes and dialogues are understandable to the modern Hebrew speaker and modern Hebrew fluent person. Now, there are questions about the letters themselves and how ancient they are, and perhaps they meant different things at different times, but this is not true. And we have books like the book of Sefer Yetzirah, known as the Book of Creation, which is attributed to Abraham. And as a reminder of the last video, Hebrew was the language of creation, as it's called in the book of Jubilees, and as it's used in the book of Genesis, which tells us about the creation story and God's commandments of creation that are all in Hebrew using these Hebrew letters. So Hebrew is the language of creation, and it was used not only by humans, but by all of creation. Everyone had this Hebrew essence, which people call Adamic. It's an essence of language. And here's an example. So Maim, water, is with two mems. It's a smooth sound, the mem. And Maim is actually mem yud mem, which is equivalent to the H2O. It's HOH. Here we have mem yud mem. Now, the other element would, for example, be esh, which is fire. And that's the sound that a fire makes when it's crackling, it's burning, it's alive. Shh, the sound of fire. And avir is air, is the aleph, which can be pronounced in different ways, and it's nothingness. It has no sound without the vowel, without the context, and that is the aleph, the first letter, which represents God and our unique selves. Ani, I, begins with an aleph. We are the smaller version of the divine creator. We are all pieces of the divine creator's spirit within us that give us life. And so these letters and this sounds, and Hebrew in general, is this very primal sounding language. It's very, very ancient. And it is the language that we all spoke until when? Until the Tower of Babel. In the Tower of Babel, humanity wanted to create a tower that reached the heavens, and God brought a mighty wind that threw the tower to the ground, but not before confusing everyone's speech so that they couldn't understand one another. One asked for a hammer, they gave him a nail, they didn't understand one another. And so then the 70 nations are born, the 70 languages are born, and we split up into this fragmented understanding of language itself, and Hebrew is lost. Until Abraham is approached by an angel. An angel comes to Abraham and opens his mouth so that he can speak, opens his ears so that he can hear, opens his spirit so that he can understand Hebrew, the language of creation. And Abraham finds these ancient texts from the ancients who came before him, and they are written in Hebrew, and now he can understand them, and now he can study them, and this is how he becomes known as the Hebrew. And his descendants become known as the Hebrews. In slavery in Egypt, the Israelites are known as the Hebrews. They have this ancient Hebrew language, and we find in el-Khadim, for example, these ancient carvings on the wall that say things like God and God help me. These are found in the mines that were mined for turquoise. The Egyptians would take their slaves to this mine that we know about in southwestern Sinai Peninsula, and there we find ancient Hebrew, which we understand to be written by these ancient Israelites when they were enslaved in Egypt. So this Hebrew language goes back very, very far. They didn't all know the forms of the Hebrew, but they knew the sounds of it, they spoke it. And eventually the Israelites come to speak Hebrew, and the books of Moses are all written in Hebrew. And during the exile, after being exiled, the Israelites had to develop languages where they would be mutually intelligible with their host countries and nations and peoples. So we get things like Yiddish and Ladino and Judeo-Arabic. So different languages develop that are a combination of the Hebrew and the host language. But all of the prayers, such as the Shema Yisrael prayer, which is mandatory, said multiple times a day, and all of the prayers, of which there are many, also the Psalms of David and things like that, which were sung in the temple, all of this is in Hebrew. And so everything develops. The Mishnah, the core of the oral law, the oral tradition of the Israelites, is in Hebrew as well. And this is studied in the Talmud. The Talmud is in Aramaic, but it's studying the Mishnah, which is in Hebrew. And many of the commentaries are in Hebrew. Most of them are in Hebrew. Only Unkelus speaks in Aramaic. He was a Roman nobleman convert, famous from that portion where he talks about Jesus in the Talmud, but also famous to Jews for having written what's known as the Targum, which is an Aramaic translation of the Torah, which many Jews read every week. And it serves as a sort of commentary, an ancient sort of commentary, because it's a translation, and every translation is a sort of commentary and interpretation. It's never going to be the essence that the original texts are, in this case, Hebrew texts. So here we have something that I brought into the conversation because it was being perceived that these letters have just changed and developed, but no, the letters are the essence of the phonetic alphabet as we know it today, and came before Phoenician, which is very, very similar to Paleo-Hebrew, and that develops into the Hebrew block script that we know of today, which is famous from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which now they're coming out and saying is older than they previously thought. So it's from the 3rd century BCE, many of those texts and scrolls. But these texts are very, very ancient. And in the Sefer Yetzirah, which perhaps we'll go through sometime in a separate video, Abraham, who is the writer of the book of creation, according to tradition, is speaking about the 22 Hebrew letters, and he puts them into categories. There are the mother letters, there are the father letters. The mother letters are Aleph, Mem, and Shin, which we talked about before. Aleph for air, Mem for Mayim, for water, and Shin for Esh, for fire. And the father letters have to do with God's holy name, the Yud, K, Vav, K. So it's Yud and He and Vav are the 3 father letters. So now we have 3 mother letters, 3 father letters. And then there are the double letters, letters that are pronounced differently if there's a dot in them, meaning if they're at the beginning of the word, usually, then they have the dot in them, they're pronounced with the harsher version. Anyway, we know a lot about these letters. They correlate with many things. The number 22 has been very significant over time, and there's a whole study on the Hebrew letters that we won't go into here, but I just wanted to talk about this, how the language Hebrew is the original language of creation. This is why it is the language of the book of Genesis, and it is the language of the Holy Pentateuch, the holiest text on earth, which was compiled by the holiest and greatest prophet on earth. That is really not debatable. I think that everyone should be able to agree that Moses was the greatest prophet who ever lived, based on both his life story and the text that he left to us, which is unlike any other text, truly. All right, and we see here how the letters have developed in their forms. However, each letter has an essence, and we see in this top row by the Proto-Canaanite, which is found in Serbit el-Khadim, in that turquoise mine. The first one is an ox. The second one, a square. It's representing a house. We have a dag, a fish, for dalit, a rosh for resh, the head. Each of these letters represents an image. So if we look at the modern block script, and we just go through really quickly, Aleph here is like the Jewish yin-yang. It's got one line with 2 lines coming out of it, and that symbolizes the unity of God and the duality of this world that stem from God. The bet symbolizes a house, a bait. Gimel, gomel, is the giving. It's also gamal, a camel, which is very giving. But gomel is to give back, and it's about giving. He's got one foot forward. A dalet is a door, for a delet. It's got an opening to go through. A hey, as we spoke about, is an open breath. Hey, for the throat. Vav is a hook. A vav means a hook, and it is a connecting word. It's known as vav hachibur, the vav of connection. It's the word and in English. Zayin is the male. Zayin is a male, zachar. Chet is like a chuppah. It is shaped like an archway. It is a goalpost to go through. A chet also means to chet. A chet is a sin. It means to miss the mark. But here we see the goalpost, essentially. And that's what this is. The chuppah is the wedding canopy, and that's what it is also shaped at. It's a portal. The chet is a portal, and the tet is like a talit, a prayer shawl that is wrapped around you. It is often associated with tum'ah and tehara, sanctity, things like that. The yud is the smallest point from which everything begins, and so it is a symbol of God and the very, very beginning. Kaf is a spoon. It represents a vessel. Lamed is a lighthouse. Lamed means to learn or to teach, everything to do with study, which is an essential component of the Israelite people and the Jewish faith, is study and teaching and learning. This is so important today and always. Mem, we said, is mayim, water. Nun is the feminine, nekeva, which is a small space here. Samech is a full circle. Somech is trust. So it is this full circle of trust. Ayin is an eye, like an eyeball. You see it has one nerve leading into these two eyes. Pe is a mouth, pe, and you see the open mouth here of this letter. Tzaddik is a righteous person, a holy person. You see he's bent over with something on his back that he's carrying, the burden that we carry when we are righteous and good. Kuf is a harsh breaking of a vessel from below. And Resh is a head, a rosh. Shin is a tooth. Also, we said Shin has to do with Esh, fire, so it's transformation. The teeth transform food into nourishment. And Tav is a note. It's the last, it's the final, it's the ending. So we hear on top, we see sort of an X. X marks the spot, it's the ending. So that was very in brief. Each of these letters have an essence and a meaning. And when we study the Hebrew texts, the ancient texts in Jubilees, in Genesis, the beginning of Genesis especially, it's so cryptic. It takes these letters and it puts them together in such a beautiful way. So I just wanted to share with you a little bit about the sanctity of the Hebrew language. This is the language of creation and the language that we all understood once, and it is at the essence of our spirits, all of us. That is truly what I believe, and it is true that it is the only language that is mutually intelligible 3,000 years ago. And today, especially when we consider also that the people speaking it serve the same God, unlike, for example, the Greeks. The Greeks served very different gods back in the day and today, etc. So serve the same God, live in the same land, speak the same language. This is true for the Israelites. It's a wonderful, interesting quote. And here we've broken it down while speaking about the Hebrew language and letters. Hope you enjoyed this video. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Please subscribe and share. Wishing you all the very best, many, many blessings to you and yours. Thank you for watching and listening. This is Modern Jubilees, and we will see you next time.